X marks the spot that could be key to learning how the Marshall Fire started. The King Super Strike derails plans to open the store where a mass shooting happened last year. 92% of our state's ICU beds are occupied. Let's look at how that number compares to years pre-pandemic. A next question about whether the Coloradans who lost homes in the fire are still saddled with mortgages. And if you can make it through all of that, the reward is our new segment called Here's Something That Isn't Horrible. Next. Been a week now since any official update on the cause of the Marshall Fire. The 12 Tribes property, fenced off by investigators for a time, is now back open. So we flew our drone over the area, getting some video, particularly in the area where a shed was seen burning. That's caught on video. Marshall Zellinger took what we saw to a wildland fire investigator.
This square, as seen from above in this drone video we recorded, is where a shed used to be on the 12 Tribes property near Highway 93 and Highway 170. It's the shed that was recorded while on fire.
And the wind is so strong.
Captured by multiple people on their cell phones. This is where investigators had a search warrant to look into the origin of the Marshall Fire.
I'm a wildland fire investigator, retired from the U.S. Forest Service.
We showed the aerial footage of what remains of the shed to wildland fire investigator Brenda Rice. She is not involved in the Marshall Fire investigation. We wondered why there would be a square trench dug around where the shed used to be.
That trench around it could be an attempt to prevent any surface escape of fire from that shed, just like you'd put a hand line for a wildland firefighter. The other possibility is, as an investigator, I would want to know if fire escaped subsurface out of the shed.
Meaning, did a fire start in the shed and burn perhaps underground before surfacing farther away?
We see that in campfires where the campfire burns down subsurface and ignites a tree root, and then it follows the tree root out and surfaces a number of feet away without any surface visibility of the fire until that tree root came back near the surface.
Rice is just an observer like we are, curious about what investigators have learned and why they dug a trench.
She also looked at our helicopter footage from the day after the fire and is also still curious about that communication line we saw right in a tree near the intersection. And she pointed out that the burn pattern from that spot also indicates that perhaps some fires started there as well.
The fire in tree roots is wild, Marshall. When I was up there after it snowed on the Friday, 36 hours later, there's 6 inches of snow on the ground, except for these veins that would run out from trees that had burned where the fire was still hot underground in their roots, and it was melting the snow atop the ground. It was just absolutely wild. But I want to ask you, so when the fire investigators are on the ground and they're trying to kind of track things back to the source, other than an ignition point, what are they looking for along the way?
Well, to get to the ignition point, and it's pretty amazing. I've seen this work done before, but you look at how something burned, how a blade of grass burned perhaps on this side, but not the other side because the wind was blowing in that direction. The same thing with trees. You look for the side that's burned and you go backwards to find where that first moment is.
That's wild. All right. Thank you, Marshall. So we told you about that open burn on the property a week before the Marshall Fire. Call from a neighbor led firefighters to find somebody who's burning trash and railroad ties out there. The property's on the east side of Highway 93 and was not under the county's burn ban. West side of the highway was under the burn ban. Fire experts tell us that what was being burned that day should not have been.
Railroad ties, a lot of people think of those as just being wood, but those are treated with creosote so that they last longer, and creosote, when it burns, is a carcinogen. So there's a lot of products associated with those. The answer is no, you don't burn those, and you should not be burning those.
Mountain View Fire was out there, but left the scene of that burn on December 24th when they saw there was a front-end loader that could move some dirt if necessary and a water source nearby. There's a call tonight for the Department of Justice Inspector General to look into what law enforcement knew about the Denver Lakewood mass shooter before the day he killed 5 people. Killed them just as he said he would in his alt-right revenge novels. The shooter wrote about his desire to subjugate women and have so-called alpha men rule the world by force, killing their perceived enemies. The shooter was eventually shot and killed by a female Lakewood police agent. He was known to Denver police, who had gotten a tip a year earlier but said that they did not have evidence of a crime at that point. The letter requesting the Department of Justice Inspector General look into what law enforcement knew and when is signed by all 4 Democrats in Colorado's U.S. House delegation. Spokeswoman told me they did not reach out to the Republican colleagues because they viewed it as being a Denver metro area issue. King Soopers, with thousands of its workers out on strike, is now delaying the reopening of the Table Mesa store next week. That store in Boulder has been closed since the shooting last year that killed 10 people there. The store was supposed to reopen on the 20th. King Soopers said today that it has decided to, quote, pause for the right moment to come together and unite on this next chapter. We know this is a monumental milestone in our healing journey and that it must be free of distractions. The state's saying about 1 in 10, 1 in 15 Coloradans is infectious with COVID right now. So the whole strategy of just let COVID rip through the unvaccinated, they get what they get, that idea supported by Governor Polis and others, does not take into account what a rampant virus in our community means for people who are immunocompromised. Here's Mark Salinger.
While much of the world looks pretty normal these days, inside homes like Eileen Adair's, there's still a mix of anxiety and frustration.
Anyone with CF has been a germaphobe for a very long time, so masks are not new for us.
Eileen has cystic fibrosis, making her immunocompromised. She comes to the hospital for treatment every couple of months. She's lived the last 2 years doing everything she can to not get sick.
I don't know that I would have done anything differently. I still was super cautious.
Now the virus is just about everywhere. It was just a matter of time before it made its way to Eileen.
I think this is day 14 of symptoms. I know a lot of people who have gotten it and who have felt like they've had a bad cold for 3 or 4 days and they sort of bounce back, and I don't feel like I'm bouncing back.
Stadiums are full, concerts are packed. COVID continues to spread. But for people who are high risk for serious illness, life is still anything but normal.
I think it's hard because everybody else has moved on in a lot of ways, and they have to continue to follow these same really sort of strict precautions.
Dr. Jen Taylor-Kauser is Eileen's pulmonologist at National Jewish Health. She's one of the directors of the Adult Cystic Fibrosis Center. Every day she treats dozens of patients who are immunocompromised.
They're still sort of trapped while the rest of the world moves on, and it's really, really hard.
It is hard, I think, to see many people just acting like there's no risk to them.
As the world moves forward, Eileen asks that people remember that not everyone who gets COVID will bounce right back.
I hope people are thoughtful and take good care of themselves and remember that not everybody has the ability to fight that they might.
We talk about community spread of the virus all the time. Now, what does that mean in a situation like this? Eileen thinks that she got COVID from going to a small Christmas gathering with just a handful of friends. They all got tested beforehand, all tested negative. And still, after that, 4 of the 7 people who were there tested positive. Kyle, you think about how different that is than going to an indoor concert, for example, or a Broncos game. The virus is literally everywhere.
And just to think about the apprehension that some of our neighbors have lived with, that not all of us, even those of us who have been careful, have had to live with for the last 2 years.
Yeah, Eileen was really worried about getting the virus because of her prior condition. She thought that it could eventually be fatal for her. And now there is a certain sense of relief that she got the virus, and she had a battle with it and still battling it now 14 days later, but she's doing better. And there's a certain sense of relief that comes with that.
Yes, indeed. Mark Salinger reporting from the delightfully decorated Salinger dwelling. Thank you, Mark. We are shifting how we measure the pandemic this week. And that's because 2/3 of the COVID-positive patients in Colorado's hospitals currently are there for something else other than COVID and just happen to have COVID. That is a big and recent shift due to the less serious, more easily transmissible Omicron variant. That news this week and our discussion about how we are going to de-emphasize hospitalization numbers as a result has given some fuel to pandemic deniers who claim without evidence that most COVID patients throughout the pandemic have not really been sick with COVID, they've been sick with something else. So this argument, try and follow me now, is that healthcare workers are not actually heroes, but they're really bloodthirsty scam artists who just want to rack up COVID diagnoses and deaths to make profit for their hospitals. One of the logical issues with that bat guano theory is why hospitals would suddenly stop that money-making scheme now, right as diagnosed COVID cases go through the roof.
So we have seen this shift happen really over just the last couple of weeks. So we do really believe that this is associated with Omicron. It's really been just since mid-December when we really started seeing Omicron take off that we started to see this proportion change.
With hospitalization numbers less useful thanks to Omicron, we are now shifting our daily checks to ICU bed capacity, hoping to give you a better gauge on hospital strain. Right now, there are 113 open ICU beds across the state, so 92% of them are occupied. Important to have context on that numbers because hospitals are not built to sit empty, so capacity is not going to sit down near zero. We wanted to know what hospital bed use looked like pre-pandemic. For some context, Hospital Association tells us that pre-pandemic average for statewide hospital bed occupancy was 68% in 2019. Rural counties, it was 40%. Now there we're talking about all beds, not just ICU beds. The Colorado Hospital Association tells us ICU bed use typically runs a bit higher than other beds because there are fewer of them. Our statewide positivity rate is still hovering just under 30%. 29.3% of tests have come back positive for COVID over the last 7 days, so just be cautious. It is floating out there in the air like the smell of money in an upslope flow. Law enforcement is after the conspiracy theory election clerk, and she's running for re-election. Homes in Boulder are going to get a once-over to assess their wildfire risk. Inspectors won't step on the property unless the resident wants help making it safer. And Governor Polis unleashes a state-of-the-state love fest on Republicans who are trying to paint him as the literal worst. Feel the love, or not. It's your call. Next. Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters is running, not from the law. I mean, they're plenty interested in the election rigging conspiracy theorists, but Clerk Peters announced today she is running for re-election. The state AG's office and the local DA also announced today, big day today, that they're opening a grand jury investigation into Peters. She was removed from her role as elections director last year as state and federal officials investigate whether the Republican clerk breached her own voting system security to leak files to fellow conspiracy theorists. Meanwhile, Clerk Peters announced today she will be seeking re-election to her post. Earlier this week, Colorado's Democratic Secretary of State Jenna Griswold offered Clerk Peters a deal that she could return to her election duties if she agreed to basically an adult supervisor, a monitor for her every move. Clerk Peters rejected that offer. Republicans at the state capitol this year are intent on framing Democratic Governor Jared Polis as an out-of-touch dictator ahead of the next election. Polis today used his State of the State address to stress bipartisanship.
You know, it feels like every time we turn on the news, we see partisanship, polarization, division across the country, across Congress. But not here in Colorado, where we set aside our differences and we come together to do what's right. It's just a part of our fabric. It's part of who we are. No one political party has a monopoly on good ideas or on love of country.
Here is the bottom line when you count the votes at the Capitol. Democrats are headed into a tough election year, so it's a pretty smart strategy to clinch up Republicans by embracing the same issues they are, like a boxer wrapping up an opponent to neutralize an attack. Republicans at the state Capitol do not have the votes to stop Democrats' bills, so they can either compromise with them and share the credit on issues they say matter as well, or they might allow Democrats to just pass laws and take the credit for those key issues. Boulder is going home to see which houses will be tough to defend from a wildfire. They're giving each property a grade. A bunch of you asked, do Coloradans who lost their homes 2 weeks ago still have to pay their mortgages? We got an answer. And we promised to share something that's not horrible as well in our segment called Here's Something That's Not Horrible. Next.
Sunshine and 60s today, cold wind and snow tomorrow. The storm arrives around 8 a.m. and the temperatures that were way above average today will drop 20 degrees into the 30s and 40s tomorrow afternoon. High and mid-level clouds are coming in tonight. The moisture will feed in around 9-10 o'clock in the morning. We're not only going to see about a trace to an inch of snow here in Denver, 2 to 4 inches over the northern and central mountains and the Front Range foothills and areas south of town, possibly 2 or 3 inches on the grass. And that means Castle Rock and Littleton up to the Golden area and into Evergreen. But again, for Denver, trace to an inch, tapering off during the day, clear and cold on Friday night with lows in the teens, windy and chilly Saturday, warmer Sunday, and then back to the 50s with sunshine for the holiday on Monday.
We are just now getting our first look at what Boulder County Sheriff's deputies heard and saw on the day of the Marshall Fire, as in this video has come into the 9 newsroom during Next Tonight within the last 20 minutes. Take a look.
Go towards Denver! Evacuate now!
This is at that Costco. You've seen the video from day one of people rushing from the inside out. This is deputies trying to direct people around there in Superior. They were running into the store, telling people to just leave their carts, get to their cars, and move east. There's another view that shows a deputy out checking on cars and houses as homes burn nearby. Not sure if we have that for you. More than 1,000 homes were lost in the fire. Again, we're just getting this video and putting it together. We'll have more tonight on 9 News at 9 and 10. Boulder's reminding residents that they're going to be coming around to check on how well protected properties are from wildfire, giving each one a grade. This is not a new program, but there's likely going to be renewed interest in it following the Marshall Fire. City inspectors gauge each property from the curb, deciding how difficult it will be to defend from a fire. Homeowners and renters who would like a more thorough assessment can sign a form which would allow an inspector to come on the property for a closer look and some suggestions. People who lost their homes in the fire will continue paying their mortgages. That was a question that we've received from a number of you, including Stephen and Rhonda just recently, wondering if Coloradans still have to pay their mortgages after they've lost their homes. Colorado's Department of Regulatory Agencies tells us that varies depending on the terms of homeowners' mortgage and insurance policy, but overall, short answer is anybody who lost their home should continue to pay off their mortgage until and unless they are told otherwise.
Contact your mortgage company, contact that bank, and let them know what's going on. One, you want to find out, is there any way they can modify the terms of the loan, provide any sort of forbearance, start talking to them about this. And two, you want to notify them of the loss. Likely they've heard about it, and you want to find out who you need to start working with there at the mortgage company to deal with this, because the mortgage company is going to be a party with a vested interest in the outcome of the insurance claim.
The Division of Insurance has a disaster assistance center. Numbers on the screen: 303-894-7490. We return with something that's not horrible, and your feedback, which sometimes is. News has not been super bright lately, so that's why we came up with here's something that's not horrible. This is like a timeline cleanser, but for your TV. Jen in Fort Collins always finds her foster kitten, Princess Ada, going fishing on her tablet. Even though she keeps sleeping, keeps trying, never caught a thing, not even once. Don writes in with a very pertinent question based on something that I said earlier in the day. With all of the different types of guano in the world, who decided bat was the craziest? Bat bleep is the craziest, Don. I think everybody just kind of agreed on that along the way. See you next time.